Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the scented shadows of ancient Persia, where beauty wasn't just skin deep, it was practically sacred. Picture it. Golden sun slanting over mud brick rooftops, perfumed gardens humming with bees, and mirrors polished from bronze reflecting faces that spent a lot of time getting just right. You're standing in front of your vanity, a carved wooden chest inlaid with lapis lazuli, preparing for another day under the scorching sun. But first, your brows. Oh yes, those caterpillars above your eyes aren't just for decoration. In ancient Persia, beauty wasn't measured in symmetry or minimalism. It was judged by how gloriously your eyebrows touched. That's right. One continuous, thick, inky black arch running straight across your forehead. Absolute dreamboat material. The unibrow wasn't just fashionable. It was a sign of intelligence, purity, and deep spiritual strength. So if yours happen to be naturally disconnected, no worries. You simply reach for the soot pot. You pinch a bit of powdered antimony, yes, that metallic stuff, mix it with the oil of charred almonds, and trace a careful arc between the brows using a tiny brush made of date palm fibers. It's a delicate art. Too thick and you look like an angry falcon. Too light and no one will take your poetry seriously. The wealthy might even enhance the look with wool tufts glued right in the center, giving that extra plush unibrow effect, kind of like gluing a tiny mustache above your eyes. You chuckle to yourself as you imagine how this would go down at your local gym today. Historians still argue whether this trend began with religious symbolism or courtly fashion. Some believe it mimicked the sacred geometry found in Persian architecture, those clean, elegant curves, and carried hidden meanings of harmony and balance. But it wasn't just women who embraced the brow. Men of status often followed suit, especially in royal courts. A stern monobrow framed by thick eyeliner? Instant authority. Speaking of eyeliner, you notice your neighbor preparing her morning face. She's layering on kohl around her eyes, tracing the almond shape into something nearly feline. She turns to you and grins. The unibrow sits proudly above, as if it's silently judging your commitment to tradition. And it is a commitment. Imagine sweating in 40-degree desert heat, with a melting line of soot threatening to drip into your eyes. But hey, beauty is pain. Or at least, a bit of stinging discomfort. You make your way out into the street, past others with brows bold and black as night, and realize something beautiful. No two unibrows are the same. Some are curved like crescent moons, others blunt as bricks. Some folks even accentuate the space between their brows with tiny dots or gold leaf, because of course they do. It's not about fitting in, it's about standing out together. You're participating in a communal language of beauty that stretches back centuries, reinforced by poets, painters, and the occasional mystic. In the markets, love poems are sold on scrolls with verses dedicated to beloveds who have brows like ravens' wings meeting in flight. A little dramatic? Sure. But you begin to appreciate how this small, dark bridge between your eyes connects you not just to the people around you, but to generations past. By mid-morning, your brow touch-up needs a little refresh. You duck into a shaded alcove, dabbing gently at the corners where sweat threatens to ruin the illusion. A young girl nearby is getting her first ceremonial unibrow drawn by her grandmother, who recites blessings with every stroke. The girl giggles, a smudge of soot landing on her cheek, and you realize this is more than vanity. It's inheritance. And if anyone dares to laugh at your luxurious forehead caterpillar, just remind them, Cleopatra may have ruled Egypt, but Persian women made forehead fashion a cosmic art. You smirk. You might just survive this beauty standard, provided you remember not to scratch your brow in the heat. You're wandering through a Persian garden now, roses blooming thick and fragrant, citrus trees leaning lazily toward stone pools where birds flit and splash. The air is rich and heavy with scent, and you're starting to understand. In ancient Persia, perfume wasn't just for flirtation. It was spiritual armor. You pause beneath a cypress tree, and a young boy passes by, balancing a shallow clay dish filled with rose petals. He's headed to the perfumer's stall, where oils are being steeped in secret mixtures of cinnamon, cardamom, and the resin of strange foreign trees that arrived by camel train. Even from a distance, the scent coils around your senses, warm, spicy, and somehow wise. Persians took their perfume seriously, like really seriously. It wasn't just about smelling good, it was about maintaining a kind of sacred cleanliness. You learn that ancient Zoroastrian teachings emphasized the power of fragrance as a reflection of divine order. Smelling sweet was a way to stay aligned with cosmic truth. Your sweat? That's not just body odor, it's a spiritual lapse waiting to happen. So you dab your wrists with spikenard oil. You rub a little musk behind your ears, derived, you're told, from the gland of a deer that frankly had a very bad day. Still, you smell expensive. Historians still argue whether these perfumes were meant more for religious ceremonies or daily wear, but evidence suggests people layered scents like fashion accessories. One for the morning prayer, another for socializing, a third for sleep, so your dreams could wander through lavender meadows instead of dusty marketplaces. Royalty had entire perfume closets. Imagine little hand-carved cedar boxes filled with miniature glass bottles, each with its own spoon and stopper. You picture yourself as a royal attendant, organizing the Queen's personal scent calendar. Mondays, frankincense and saffron. Thursdays, rosewater and a whisper of civet. And let's talk about rosewater. It's everywhere. In drinks, in food, in face washing, even in fountains. Just gently burbling out over marble, creating the most luxurious humidifier imaginable. You dip your fingers into one such pool now, the surface cool and trembling with fragrance. One drop on your tongue and it's floral, sweet, and oddly calming. There's even a beauty hack you overhear in the market. If you want to make your eyes seem brighter and your skin glow, mix a little rose water with saffron threads and let it sit overnight under the stars. The next morning, pat it gently on your cheeks. Instant radiance, or at least the confidence to pretend you're radiant. A merchant beckons you into a tiny shop. Shelves are lined with tiny amphorae and palm-sized jars. He opens one with a flourish, and the smell hits you like poetry. Soft jasmine, smoky oud, and something sharp you can't place. You ask him the name. Bahar-e-Dust, he says. springtime of the beloved. You resist the urge to cry on the spot. Turns out, perfuming wasn't just a personal ritual, it was social currency. Persian hosts would offer their guests scented oils to rub on their hands before eating. Even libraries were perfumed to create a more refined thinking space. Can't write poetry in a place that smells like goats, obviously. And in love, perfume was everything. A letter sent without a fragrance was considered rude. You had to scent it with ambergris or rose oil, so that when your beloved unrolled the scroll, your memory wrapped around them like a silk scarf. You pass a group of women gathered beneath an awning, braiding jasmine flowers into their hair. One leans toward another and whispers, "Smell that? That's the scent of her engagement." They all laugh. You laugh too, imagining modern dating profiles coming with scent samples. There's one final layer to all this. Health. Ancient Persian physicians genuinely believed that good smells promoted bodily balance, that bad odors could literally make your soul sick. So yeah, maybe spritzing yourself with rose water wasn't just about impressing the prince. It was about keeping the demons at bay. Your head spins just a little as you leave the perfume stall. Not from the scent, but from the understanding that in Persia, to be beautiful was to smell like you belonged to another realm. You pause in the alleyway, take one last inhale of the thick floral breeze, and realize you're never going back to deodorant again. You're crouched now beside a low bronze mirror, your fingers delicately swirling a thick, earthy paste between your palms. It smells vaguely of cloves and something medicinal. This, apparently, is your henna mixture for the day, and you're about to turn your hands into walking spell scrolls. Henna in ancient Persia wasn't just about looking fabulous at weddings, though that helped. It was a daily or seasonal ritual that blended beauty, protection, and a whole lot of symbolism. You dip a reed pen into the paste and begin dotting small, sun-like patterns onto your fingertips, steady as a calligrapher. The woman beside you, probably your aunt, nods approvingly and hums a lullaby that's half prayer, half poetry. Henna shields the soul from envy, she says, and keeps the evil eye from finding your joints. You blink at her, confused. She just grins and adds, "Wrists are where worry lives." Historians still argue whether the Persian use of henna was borrowed from earlier Indian customs or if it developed independently. What's clear, though, is that Persia made it its own, lacing it with regional herbs, grinding it with dried rose petals, and sometimes adding saffron for a golden hue that whispered luxury. As your designs dry to a reddish brown, you reach for a small wooden box filled with black coal. Now this stuff is your multi-tool. It lines your eyes like eyeliner. It cools them in the desert heat. It wards off demons. It gives you an instantly smug, smoky gaze that says, "Yes, I've read Hafez twice." You squint into your reflection, gently dragging a sliver of coal from the inner corner of your eye to the edge like a painter restoring a sacred manuscript. The pigment's made of crushed galena stone. Yes, it sparkles slightly, and if applied right, it'll last through sandstorms and awkward family visits. Everyone's using coal. Babies for their protection. Soldiers for their battlefield intimidation. Poets, because obviously. Even camels sometimes got a swipe near the eyes to protect them from evil spirits. You try not to picture a moody eyeliner-wearing camel. You fail. What's fascinating is that applying makeup in ancient Persia wasn't considered vain. It was spiritual maintenance. Just as one cleans the house or sharpens a blade, one prepares the body for the day's energies. You weren't just painting your face. You were composing a spell. You overhear two older women arguing softly nearby. One insists coal is more effective if the stone is blessed beneath a full moon. The other swears by adding a pinch of crushed basil leaves. You nod solemnly, as though you, too, are an expert in moon-blessed basil eyeliner. As your henna finishes setting, you rise and admire your fingers, decorated now in swirling vines, stars, and the occasional secret initial. These patterns aren't random. They're memories, desires, sometimes prayers. You think of it like tattooing your dreams. Only you get to change the playlist every few weeks. You walk through the market, your hands carefully outstretched to avoid smudging, and see others with henna winding up their arms, sometimes even circling ankles or crawling along the back of a neck. A man passes by with thick black coal around his eyes and a quiet dignity that makes you straighten your posture a little. Later that evening, under a flickering oil lamp, you hear someone whisper a spell, half in jest, as she dabs coal across her eyelids. Hide me from envy, and let no liar prosper. It's oddly comforting, like putting on armor, but instead of metal plates, it's pigment and plants and poetry. You settle onto a cushioned bench beside a sleeping cat, hands dry now and gleaming with coppery light. There's something deeply grounding about the whole ritual. In a world of sandstorms and shifting politics, you can still return to your mirror, your henna, your coal, and emerge a little stronger. And let's be honest, you look amazing. You're running your fingers through your hair, or rather, you're hoping you have hair to run your fingers through. Because in ancient Persia, hair wasn't just something that grew from your head. It was status, pride, identity, and frankly, a bit of a competitive sport. You're seated in a courtyard now, legs crossed, watching a nobleman's attendant carefully pin an enormous hairpiece onto her employer's head. The structure is impressive. Layers of human and animal hair woven together, then fluffed to regal volume. It's less casual tousle and more architectural marvel. You're pretty sure it could stop a bird mid-flight. Balding, you quickly learn, was a serious source of distress, especially for men of the court. Historians still argue whether this anxiety was fueled more by vanity or superstition, but either way, there were solutions. Elaborate wigs, head wraps scented with almond oil, even topical treatments made from crushed garlic and vinegar. Note: do not try this at home unless you're trying to summon ghosts. There were ointments, so many ointments. One popular recipe combined saffron, date pits, and fig sap, all simmered in lamb fat until thick and golden. You were supposed to massage this potion into your scalp 3 times a day while reciting a verse about blossoming orchards. You'd either regrow hair or just smell like dessert. For those who did have lush locks, there was no casual flopping about. Persian hair was brushed with care, using combs carved from ivory or polished wood, and always perfumed. Always. You're handed a tiny bottle of violet oil and told to warm it between your palms before applying it to your ends. The hair, your host says, must whisper a garden when you move. You chuckle, imagining your own modern shampoo bottle trying to live up to that standard. And it wasn't just the hair on your head. Beards, too, received the royal treatment. You notice a group of young men having their beards shaped into elegant curves, cheeks closely shaved, but the chin and mustache sculpted with such precision you'd think they used stencils. Beard oil was essential, made from sesame, myrrh, or sometimes ambergris if you were really fancy. And let's not even get started on beard combs. Some were inlaid with silver or carved into birds. Wigs, for both men and women, were not always hidden. In fact, many were a public art form. A woman might wear a plaited piece dyed with indigo and adorned with gold thread, while a nobleman could sport a curled, glossy mop that made you think of silk worms and power. You learn of one queen who reportedly had a collection of 26 wigs, each styled to represent a different royal province. One for diplomacy, one for mourning, one for accidentally running into your ex at the bathhouse. But sometimes it wasn't about glamour. In rural areas or among certain religious sects, shaving the head entirely was a symbol of humility or mourning. You pass a woman with a freshly shorn scalp, her hair carefully gathered in a silk pouch to be burned ceremonially. There's something hauntingly beautiful about it, like shedding an old version of yourself to make way for silence. You hear someone mutter nearby, "Hair is memory. Cut it, and you lose something." That sits with you for a moment, and yet nothing escapes the whims of fashion. Some clay tablets show styles that would make modern influencers blink. Twin top knots, massive side braids like ram's horns, and even short, blunt cuts that historians believe signaled rebellion or priesthood. You try on a modest wig, laughing as a mirror reflects back someone who looks like they've wandered off the set of a very dramatic soap opera. Still, there's something thrilling about it. Hair here isn't just decoration, it's language. Every strand says something. Before leaving, an old barber hands you a small scroll. On it, an old Persian proverb. The head without hair is a sky without stars. You decide to oil your scalp just in case. You're standing barefoot on cool stone tiles, staring at an open shell-shaped bowl filled with pearl dust? That's right. You're about to begin your ancient Persian skincare routine, And step 1 involves gently scrubbing your cheeks with a mixture that probably cost someone 3 goats and a very polite argument with a pearl diver. In ancient Persia, skin care was more than vanity. It was medicine, ritual, and poetry wrapped in one. You scoop a pinch of the powder and mix it with rose water from a nearby basin, creating a silky paste. It smells faintly of ocean and flowers, and something ancient, like a memory you never lived. You massage it into your face in slow circles. The grains are soft, almost polite. This isn't the aggressive apricot scrub from a tube you might know. This is skin care that wants to have a conversation with your pores. Persian physicians, especially those following the teachings of Avicenna or Ibn Sina, believed that a healthy outer appearance was directly linked to inner balance. Smooth skin meant you had your humors in check. Too oily? Your phlegm was probably lazy. Too dry? Your inner fire was throwing tantrums. You're now very aware of your cheekbones and emotional state. Historians still argue whether skincare recipes were passed down formally through physicians or just by generations of extremely judgmental aunties. Either way, the knowledge is deep. Recipes for masks and moisturizers were written in elegant Persian script, some even preserved in medical texts as legitimate treatments. You apply a second blend, ground almonds mixed with egg whites and a touch of vinegar. It's cooling and smells faintly of cake batter, which feels both relaxing and mildly dangerous. As it dries, a maid waves a fan made of peacock feathers in your direction, and for a brief moment, you understand true luxury. Next comes the toner, which is really just more rose water, but this time infused with saffron. It stains your palms yellow for a second, but leaves your skin glowing like a fresh apricot. You catch your reflection in a brass mirror. Somehow, you already look more thoughtful. You're offered a dab of sesame oil mixed with ground lotus seeds. You hesitate. It looks like pudding. You apply it anyway and instantly feel like your face has its own tiny silk robe. Let's not forget sunscreen. Yes, sunscreen. While they didn't have SPF numbers, ancient Persians used plant pastes and even powdered white lead, yikes, to shield skin from the brutal sun. The less risky option? A fine veil of linen soaked in milk and saffron, draped across the face like a protective daydream. You try it and squint through your gauzy filter. Everything looks a little more romantic. You overhear a grandmother scolding her grandson. If your skin cracks before your voice deepens, you'll never marry a poet. Harsh, but effective. The boy obediently pats himself with something that smells like cucumber and regret. There were even specialty treatments for seasonal skin. In summer, it was cucumber peels and clay masks. In winter, melted sheep fat. Yes, sheep fat, infused with frankincense. You begin to wonder how much of this is skin care and how much is preparing yourself to become a very attractive candle. A man walks by offering exfoliation services using dried fig pulp and crushed oyster shells. His hands are stained orange, his apron crisp. You consider signing up, but recall how sensitive your nose is. Next time. By now, your face feels refreshed, your thoughts slowed, your shoulders lower than when you arrived. This isn't skin care in the modern sense. It's a kind of recalibration, a way to pause, sit with yourself, and emerge shinier. As the sun begins to drop, casting long golden shadows across the courtyard, you finish your routine with a final rinse. The water smells of lavender. A child drops a sprig of mint into the basin and runs off giggling. You watch your reflection ripple, then settle. For a fleeting second you think, yes, I could totally rule an empire looking like this. You've barely stepped out of the garden courtyard, skin still dewy and scented like a fruit salad, when you spot it. A royal procession rolling through the street. Musicians, horses, silk banners snapping in the wind. But your eyes go straight to the beard of the nobleman in the front. It's glistening. That's right. You're about to tumble head first into the bejeweled world of Persian beards, where facial hair wasn't just a masculine accessory, it was divine, decorated, and quite possibly more pampered than your entire skincare routine. This man's beard isn't merely long, it's shaped into soft waves, combed to perfection, and shimmering ever so slightly in the sunlight. You later learn he's used a mixture of sesame oil, crushed pearls, and a bit of soot to deepen the color and add that royal shine. Honestly, you're both intimidated and impressed. In ancient Persian culture, beards were a big deal. They were symbols of dignity, wisdom, power, and in some cases, even sanctity. To shave a man's beard without his consent was considered one of the greatest insults imaginable. In fact, one of the early Persian kings reportedly started a war over it. Historians still argue whether that story is exaggerated, but let's just say, don't mess with a Persian's chin fuzz. You stroll past a barber shop, well, a sort of shaded stall where an elder man with a silver comb is tending to a client's facial hair like it's a rare bonsai tree. The tools are beautiful. Brass scissors, bone-handled brushes, tiny pots of oil. The process, slow, reverent, as if each beard hair is being whispered to. You're ushered in by a boy holding a steaming cloth. For the pores, he explains, and the soul. Your face is wrapped, your shoulders gently massaged, and soon a thin herbal oil is being applied to your own, somewhat humble, beard. It smells of myrtle and something faintly citrusy. "This one's for clarity of thought," your barber murmurs. You try not to giggle. They weren't shy about coloring beards either. Dyes were made from henna, indigo, and walnut husk, depending on what shade of intensity you were going for. A bright copper beard meant youth and energy. A blue-black one said, "I write poetry, but I also command armies." You pick something in between. Beard accessories? Absolutely. Wealthier men sometimes wove in thin threads of gold or tied tiny bells into the ends during festivals. One general is rumored to have worn a single ruby on a string in his beard, both as a love token and as a warning that he was literally too pretty to die.
Even philosophers got into the act. Ancient texts describe sages tugging at their beards thoughtfully while debating metaphysics in rose gardens. You test the motion yourself. It's oddly satisfying, makes you feel smarter already. One fringe belief you overhear involves beard symmetry. If your beard curls more on the right, a street merchant claims, you'll have many sons. On the left, you'll marry someone who sings in their sleep. You pretend to study your own reflection in a copper plate, unsure which fate you prefer. There's even a tale told in whispers of a priest who refused to speak to anyone with a lopsided beard. He believed uneven follicles were a sign of moral instability. Okay, buddy. Women weren't left out of this hairy narrative. While they didn't grow beards themselves, typically, they often helped maintain their husbands, mixing oils, combing out knots, and braiding small sections with protective spells woven in. One love poem reads, "Your beard, my garden, my fingers, its wind." You don't know whether to swoon or giggle. Probably both. As night falls, you pass an older man lighting a small lantern near the temple steps. His beard is snowy white, shaped like a crescent moon, and you nod respectfully. He nods back. No words exchanged. None needed. You reach up to touch your own chin. Maybe not royal just yet, but with a little oil, a lot of patience, and a hint of poetic flair, you're getting there. You wake the next morning under a light linen canopy, golden light pouring in like honey. A small bronze tray waits beside your cushion, holding a jar of pale cream, a brush made from reeds, and a folded note that reads, "For the moonlit glow you deserve." You stretch, pat your face, and remember. Today's lesson is all about skin lightening, a beauty standard that had ancient Persians reaching for some seriously creative and occasionally dangerous ingredients. In ancient Persia, pale skin wasn't just admired, it was aspired to. The lighter your complexion, the more you were assumed to be noble, refined, and free of outdoor labor. In a culture that worshipped poetry and perfume, sunburned cheeks were, well, a little off-brand. So, how did they get that porcelain glow in a land of relentless sunshine? With pastes, of course. You scoop some of the cream onto your fingertips. It's cold, a little gritty, and smells vaguely like vinegar and clay. That's because it's made from white lead, chalk dust, and crushed lily root. You pause. The white lead gives you pause. Historians still argue whether people truly understood the long-term toxicity of lead-based cosmetics. Some suggest that alchemists warned against overuse. Others believe the aesthetic pressure simply outweighed the health risk, because nothing says high society like mild neurological damage, apparently. But not all lighteners were deadly. Almond paste mixed with milk and lemon juice was a gentler option. It didn't work as quickly, but it was less likely to make your teeth fall out. You apply a bit to your neck, already imagining your debut at the next garden poetry recital. And then there was rice flour, another mild favorite. Finely ground, often mixed with egg whites or yogurt, It created a natural sunscreen/brightener. You overhear someone describe it as moonlight in powder form, which sounds suspiciously like a modern beauty brand slogan. Of course, pale skin wasn't the only goal. The texture had to be flawless. So folks exfoliated with powdered pumice stone, crushed walnut shells, and even sand mixed with olive oil. You try one such scrub and instantly feel like your cheeks could cut glass. You pause to reflect on something. How strange it is that in modern times, people risk skin damage to tan, while in ancient times, they risked it to lighten. Different cultures, same obsession, being something else. Back in the courtyard, a group of noble women are painting their faces for a religious festival. They layer on the lightening paste, add a subtle hint of carmine to the cheeks, from dried insect shells naturally, and finish with a dusting of rice powder. The effect is ethereal, ghostly, yes, but elegant. You find yourself leaning in, watching the light bounce off their faces like dew on marble. One of them catches your eye and laughs. "Too much?" she says, pointing at the chalky layer. You grin and reply, "Just enough to confuse the sun." Children, too, were sometimes treated with lightning bombs before ceremonies. You see a mother gently applying a turmeric milk mixture to her daughter's arms while humming a lullaby. "The sun is a trickster," she says. "We offer it gold to keep it kind." There were even oral concoctions said to purify the skin from within. Teas brewed from cucumber peel, rose hips, or barley water. You sip a lukewarm cup offered by a street vendor and immediately question every beverage decision you've made in life. Yet not everyone agreed on the trend. Some poets wrote verses celebrating sun-darkened skin as proof of a life well lived. One sassy bard even called pale cheeks the face of fear, not freedom. Debate, it seems, is eternal. Still, beauty trends persisted. Portraits of royals and nobles often showed faces pale as bone, ringed by dark kohl, lips tinted faintly with pomegranate stain. You imagine being painted like that, half angel, half ghost, fully fabulous. By afternoon, you're feeling slightly powdered, mildly perfumed, and mostly unsure whether you've enhanced your beauty or entered stage 1 of alchemical transmutation. Either way, you're glowing. And if anyone asks why you're walking around looking like a powdered apricot, just smile mysteriously and whisper, "It's tradition." The sun is low and amber now, draping the bazaar in sleepy gold. You wander past stalls of embroidered fabrics, trays of candied dates, and, ooh, jewelry. So much jewelry. Tiny gold bells, braided silver cuffs, earrings shaped like leaves, fish, moons. It's not just beautiful. It's biographical. Because in ancient Persia, jewelry wasn't only about decoration. It was your resume, your vibe, and possibly your dating profile, all dangling from your earlobes. A girl catches your eye, her ears lined with 3 studs each, one lapis, one pearl, one carved bit of bone. You ask her what they mean. She shrugs and says, "This one was a wedding gift. That one I found by the river. And this one?" She grins. "I wear this when I want to be left alone." Piercings were common, not just among women, but among men, priests, and even children. Some people had delicate nose studs shaped like tiny birds. Others wore thick gold hoops that clinked when they nodded. You try on a pair of earrings shaped like griffins. Heavy, regal, slightly dangerous. You approve. Historians still argue whether certain designs indicated tribe, status, or simply taste. But there's consensus on one thing. Jewelry told a story. Not necessarily in words, but in stone and metal and placement. A single turquoise bead could mean, "I am blessed with good fortune." A double chain between ear and nose might say, "I'm married and my husband's watching." And don't even get started on rings. You pass an old merchant whose fingers are stacked like a museum shelf. One bears a lion-shaped garnet. Another is a simple band of copper etched with poetry so small you'd need an ant to recite it. He offers you one carved from camel bone. "It smells like wind when it's hot," he says, as if that explains everything. Hair jewelry was its own universe. Braided chains, polished combs, tiny pins tipped with quartz. Women often adorned their hair with small charms said to keep envy away, or, in some cases, attract it on purpose. Nothing wrong with a little accidental flex. You're led to a small booth draped in indigo fabric where a woman applies Q-lined dots just behind your ear. "Now your thoughts won't wander too far," she murmurs. You nod solemnly, as if this is a normal Tuesday. You catch sight of a noblewoman walking slowly through the crowd, the hem of her robe stitched with dozens of bells so small they don't ring, they whisper. Around her neck is a chain of coin-like pendants, each engraved with a name. Not hers. Ancestors, maybe, or past lovers. You're not sure which is more poetic. Jewelry also marked big life events. Births, deaths, marriages, moon cycles, you name it. You hear about one tradition where a mother would place a charm on a newborn's ankle, then remove it only when the child first spoke a word. If that word was something like camel, well, the charm went back on. There were even amulets with mystical properties, little pendants stuffed with saffron, bone dust, or verses written in microscopic calligraphy. One man claims his necklace keeps away heartbreak and kidney stones. You're not entirely convinced, but hey, he looks confident. And let's not forget scent jewelry, tiny lockets that held drops of attar oil, rose, jasmine, even cinnamon. You're handed one shaped like a pomegranate. Inside, frankincense and what smells like crushed violet. You clip it to your robe and immediately feel like someone with excellent secrets. The metalwork itself is stunning. Hammered gold, twisted silver, bronze etched so finely it could pass for silk. Some earrings double as tiny mirrors. Some rings unscrew to reveal powder or perfume. One even holds a single seed. For planting, the vendor says, or for symbolism, whichever you prefer. You pass a mirror and pause. Your ears sparkle. Your neck glimmers. Your hair comb hums when you turn. You don't just look beautiful. You look storied. Because in ancient Persia, jewelry wasn't what you wore when you had something to say. It was what you wore when words weren't enough. You brush past a silk curtain into a cool chamber and, oof, instantly feel underdressed. Robes swish, sleeves flutter, embroidery glints like starlight. You're about to dive into the shimmering world of ancient Persian fashion, where every thread whispered wealth, virtue, or just how incredibly good you looked reclining on a divan. A servant hands you a robe. It's soft as breath, dyed a deep blue with indigo, and patterned with tiny golden pomegranates. You slip it on and feel immediately like you should be drinking spiced wine and delivering cryptic political advice. Clothing in ancient Persia wasn't merely functional. It was social code, aesthetic statement, and often a subtle power play. Colors meant things. So did sleeve length. Even the type of weave could indicate your region, your rank, or how recently you'd had a spiritual revelation. You tug gently at the sleeves. Long and flowing, they graze your fingertips. Perfect. This cut, popular during the Achaemenid period, was often worn by nobles who didn't have to do things like carry water or chase goats. If your sleeves could dip into soup, you were winning. Fabrics ranged from simple linen to luxurious silk. Yes, the Persians had access to silk via trade with China long before it hit European wardrobes. You picture those caravans, camels stacked high with bolts of shimmering fabric, trudging through deserts while merchants dreamt of embroidery patterns. One noble walks past you wearing what can only be described as a walking poem. Her robe is pale pink, stitched with silver vines and birds mid-flight. Her belt, a long strip of jeweled velvet, wraps twice around her waist and dangles like a lazy comet. You suddenly feel the urge to stand straighter. Historians still argue whether Persia's obsession with elegance came more from religious ideals or royal influence, but the results are undeniable. Even peasants often wore belts with decorative tassels and dyed their tunics for special events. Looking good was everyone's responsibility. Patterns weren't just pretty, they were coded. Pomegranates symbolized fertility, cypress trees, eternal life. Lions meant strength and royal proximity. You study your robe's pomegranates with new respect. And oh, the layering. A tunic, overlaid with a robe, overlaid again with a cloak. Not because you were cold, because you had status. You notice someone layering on a sheer outer wrap dyed saffron yellow. It does nothing for warmth, but everything for drama. You nod, impressed. Footwear, pointed shoes, slightly curled at the toe, often made from leather dyed red or green. You're told that higher curls meant higher class, which makes you briefly consider curling your socks at home just for the fun of it. Jewelry, because yes, it's still here, was woven into clothing. Tiny bells stitched into hems, amber beads sewn into cuffs, even collars with embedded coins that clink when you bow your head, turning a simple nod into an economic flex. You spot a soldier off duty, lounging in a sleeveless linen tunic with gold edging. Even the military uniforms were tailored to impress. If you're going to conquer kingdoms, might as well look fly doing it. There were even specific festival garments, robes dyed in sunset colors, overcoats painted with flowers using natural pigments, and silk veils that shimmered under moonlight. Imagine the whole city turning into a walking bouquet. And let's talk hats. Soft felt caps for the humble, tall pleated headgear for priests, elaborate feathered turbans for the elite. You try one on and nearly fall over. Apparently, beauty trends didn't always account for wind resistance. A tailor invites you into his workshop. Bolts of fabric tower around you like colorful walls. He's stitching an intricate robe by hand, humming a tune about a moon maiden and a lazy fox. He pauses only to say, "If a robe cannot dance in the wind, it should not leave the loom." You write that down immediately. You return to the courtyard in full regalia. Silk brushing your ankles, gold thread catching the light, your belt tied just off center, because yes, you're artistic. You don't just feel clothed, you feel composed. And as you lounge among cushions, sipping mint tea, you realize fashion here isn't about being trendy. It's about telling the world, without saying a word, exactly who you are and who you might become. You're invited now to a special treat, a day at the hammam, or Persian bathhouse. Except calling it just a bathhouse feels like calling Persepolis a nice patio. No, this is a full-blown beauty ritual with gossip, steam, and... Wait, are those leeches? You step through an arched doorway into a warm, misty chamber lit by tiny oil lamps. The air smells like herbs, basil, mint, rosemary, and something sharp and clean like fresh limestone. A woman draped in towels hands you a small jar. "Scrub," she says, "then stories." The hammam was more than hygiene. It was a social stage, a medical spa, and yes, a full-body exfoliation chamber. The elite might visit 3 times a week. Others came for weddings, birthdays, or just to share the latest rumors about who wore their unibrow too thick at last week's poetry recital. You sit on a stone bench as a bath attendant lathers you with a paste made from chickpea flour and yogurt. It's grainy but oddly comforting, like being marinated in hummus by someone who really believes in your glow-up. Then comes the kisi, a rough mitt that removes layers of dead skin like old regrets. She scrubs with the enthusiasm of someone debriefing after a dramatic breakup. "This is for envy," she mutters. "Scrub. This is for bad poetry." Scrub. You leave behind enough skin to knit a small scarf. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses originated in Persia or were borrowed and refined from earlier Babylonian or Greek traditions. But by the time we reach the Achaemenid Empire, Persian hammams are renowned for being the cleanest, steamiest, and most philosophically chatty places in the ancient world. You sip a cup of warm barley tea and listen. Nearby, two older women are whispering about a neighbor's new foot jewelry. Another pair debates whether dreams mean more if you have them in steam. One simply sighs. She wore linen in autumn, imagine. You nod solemnly. Scandalous. But it's not all just loofahs and hot takes. The hammam has a medical side too. You're ushered into a side chamber where an elderly healer sits beside a tray of jars. One contains honey mixed with turmeric for inflammation. Another, leech water. You squint. That's not metaphorical, is it? Nope. It's leech water. Because in ancient Persian medicine, leeches were believed to balance bodily humors, reduce swelling, and draw out bad energies. One gets placed near your ankle. It wiggles. You faint internally. Some bathhouses even had cupping therapy, using hot glass domes to draw toxins from the skin. You try one. It hurts in a way that makes your soul sit up and apologize for everything. Then there are the clay masks, applied with soft brushes made of red earth and pomegranate rind. You sit in the cool room, mask drying on your face, while someone gently oils your feet with saffron-infused sesame oil. Your toes have never felt so culturally significant. Children splash nearby in a smaller pool. A boy dunks his head and pops up shouting, "I am clean enough for a kingdom!" Everyone claps. You're tempted to shout the same, but your mask would crack. After the treatments, you're given a robe, a fig, and a nap mat. This is what luxury looks like. Clean pores, loose limbs, and absolutely no intention of moving for the next hour. You feel like butter melting on a sun-warmed plate. Before you leave, a woman offers you a clay pebble. "Keep it dry," she says. "Break it when you need to start over." You slip it into your robe pocket, heart oddly full. As you step back into the sunlight, skin radiant and soul uncrumpled, you realize something. In ancient Persia, cleanliness wasn't next to godliness. It was godliness, with exfoliation, storytelling, and the occasional surprise leech. You're walking now through the crowded avenues of a Persian town just before dusk, and all at once, a strange realization hits you. Everyone smells amazing. Not just good, deliberately amazing. A breeze catches the air and delivers a bouquet of sandalwood, rose oil, and... Is that jasmine under someone's armpit? That's right. Tonight, you're exploring one of ancient Persia's most unexpectedly delightful beauty secrets: perfumed sweat and fragrant feet. You duck into a shaded alcove and watch a woman dust her underarms with a soft powder. It's pale green, made from ground herbs, sandalwood, and dried myrtle. "It keeps me cool," she tells you. and keeps evil spirits from nesting in my sweat. You nod slowly, unsure whether to laugh or find a pouch immediately. See, in a time without deodorant as we know it, ancient Persians had their own clever ways of staying fresh. And not just fresh for hygiene's sake, fragrant, on purpose, even in places you wouldn't expect. You're handed a small sachet filled with crushed rose petals and mint leaves. It's to be worn inside the folds of your tunic. For inner garden aroma, the seller explains, with a perfectly straight face. Historians still argue whether these fragrant practices were widespread among all social classes or reserved for the elite. But enough references survive in poetry and personal letters to suggest that smelling like a meadow was pretty much the national pastime. And it didn't stop at armpits. You hear a soft jingling behind you and turn to find a dancer adjusting the tiny silver bells on her sandals. Beneath her feet, a basin of perfumed water. She steps in, lets the liquid soak the leather soles, and steps out again. With each graceful move, her feet release a soft trail of orange blossom scent. You blink. You had no idea your toes were capable of such elegance. You decide to try it yourself. A kindly merchant offers a shallow dish of water steeped in lavender and saffron threads. You dip your feet in and immediately feel the stress of several centuries of modern shoe-wearing melt away. Your ankles smell like a really good poem. And there were other tricks. Smearing a paste of lime and myrtle under the arms to reduce sweat. Dusting crushed violet root inside your shoes to banish odor. Even scenting the inner seams of clothing with resins so that your movement released fragrance like a secret handshake with the air. One elderly woman boasts that her great-grandmother's feet once made a poet swoon. He passed out in the marketplace, she says proudly. They thought it was heat stroke. It was sandalwood. You offer polite applause. But the connection between scent and soul ran deeper than cosmetic flair. Zoroastrian beliefs, which deeply influenced Persian daily life, emphasized purity of both body and spirit. A pleasant scent was seen as spiritually clean, a signal that one's inner order was in balance. To stink, that was disorder, and possibly demonic. You pass a temple and inhale a swirl of incense, burnt myrrh and cedar bark. A priest sprinkles rose water near the threshold and gently fans it with a peacock feather. You ask him why. To keep the divine nose pleased, he says with a wink. You chuckle, but later that evening, as you rinse your feet in a bowl of milk and basil leaves, a common night treatment, apparently, you can't help but feel calmer, more centered. There's something oddly magical about walking around knowing your very scent trail is a thing of beauty. You lay down to rest, a perfumed cloth tucked into your pillowcase, and marvel at the world where even sweat was an opportunity for elegance. And tomorrow, you're adding fragrant foot baths to your morning routine, because frankly, your ankles deserve poetry too. You wake gently to the sound of reed flutes and the scent of warm bread. As you stretch, someone hands you a small branch. not for swatting flies or stirring tea, but for brushing your teeth. That's right. Today, you're stepping into the bright, minty fresh world of ancient Persian dental care, where white teeth and sweet breath were as prized as poetry. The branch is from an arak tree, also known as the miswak. You chew gently on the end until the fibers fray, forming a natural brush. The taste is earthy, a bit spicy, with a tingle that feels cleansing. You begin to scrub, marveling at the subtle mintiness and wondering why you ever trusted anything in a plastic tube. In ancient Persia, oral hygiene was no casual affair. A clean mouth was essential, not just for health, but for social grace. According to old texts, bad breath was considered a sign of spiritual neglect, because if your soul was well tended, surely your gums would be too. You sit in the courtyard next to a young man mixing a tooth-cleaning paste. He grinds salt, dried pomegranate skin, and powdered charcoal into a thick black sludge. He dips his miswak into it and flashes a grin that's surprisingly sparkly. "You want teeth like pearls?" he says. "Then scrub like you mean it." Historians still argue whether these dental practices were universally adopted or mostly reserved for nobility and the educated elite. But archaeological evidence shows wear patterns on ancient teeth that suggest regular brushing, plus accounts from foreign visitors often mention how Persians spoke with breath perfumed like roses. That's thanks to rinses. Oh yes, mouth rinses. You're offered a cup of warm rose water with a dash of vinegar and honey. You swish. You gargle. You accidentally swallow a little and now feel spiritually enlightened and mildly confused. Some even chewed on frankincense resin as a kind of ancient breath mint. Others preferred clove buds or strips of cinnamon bark tucked into the cheek. You try one and instantly feel like your molars are meditating. And teeth weren't just kept clean. They were fashioned. Some people polished them with fine sand or chalk, creating a literal sparkle when they smiled. Others darkened the gaps between teeth with soot to give the illusion of neat, uniform spacing. A little odd by modern standards, perhaps, but surprisingly effective if you squint in a bronze mirror. You're told of one king who had his goldsmith craft tiny inlays for his molars, decorative studs made of pearl and turquoise. He only wore them on holy days, or when reciting epic poems about dragons. Naturally, there was also etiquette. Chewing loudly was frowned upon. Speaking with food in your teeth? Unthinkable. One noblewoman sighs and says, "A man may forget my name, but he'll remember if I spoke with spinach on my smile." Fair point. Some healers believed certain mouth odors revealed imbalances in the body. A sour scent, too much bile, metallic breath, anger trapped in the liver. Remedies included chewing on sweet basil, drinking barley broth, or, more dramatically, pressing a warm fig to your cheeks until you felt emotionally aligned. Toothache? Try clove oil, ground myrrh, or a prayer whispered into a walnut, which you then bury under a pomegranate tree. You're not sure about the science, but it definitely sounds like a good story. You spend an hour at the local herbalist, learning about tooth powders made from dried mint, coriander seeds, and even powdered oyster shell. One blend is kept in a carved box shaped like a lion's head. You take a sniff and feel your sinuses rearrange themselves in gratitude. Before leaving, you're given a small scroll. It reads, "Let your tongue be sweet, and your teeth like the gates of paradise, for no wisdom may pass a crooked mouth." You roll it up and tuck it into your sleeve, not just because it's poetic, but because your breath currently smells like a bouquet, and your teeth could probably signal passing ships in the night. You smile at your reflection in a bowl of water and think, yes, these pearls are ready to recite verses. You sit beneath a cypress tree, watching a group of young men preen in a polished brass mirror. One strokes his mustache with the care of a jeweler inspecting a gem. Another adjusts the curve of his brow with a twig dipped in charcoal. And there, right in the middle of his forehead, the most dramatic, unapologetic unibrow you've seen all day. It practically smolders. Welcome to one of ancient Persia's boldest beauty binaries, the unibrow versus the mustache, two facial features that held more emotional and cultural weight than most family heirlooms. By now, you're familiar with the iconic Persian unibrow, but today, you learn just how sacred it truly was. A full, unbroken brow wasn't just attractive, it was poetic. It signaled wisdom, sincerity, and a soul that didn't believe in half measures. You pass a group of women applying brow paste made of soot and almond oil, carefully connecting their brows like artists restoring ancient murals. One leans over and says, "Only fools have gaps between their thoughts." Her friends nod. You blink slowly and start dabbing soot between your own eyebrows, just in case. And then there's the mustache. Oh, the mustache. In ancient Persia, this wasn't some casual lip fuzz. It was a sacred badge of maturity, masculinity, and sometimes even divinity. Young boys weren't taken seriously until the shadow of a mustache appeared. No upper lip, no wisdom, no wine, no whispering romantic verses into the night air. Historians still argue whether the mustache or the beard carried more symbolic weight in Persian society. But one thing is clear. The mustache was often more visible, more expressive, and definitely more meticulously groomed. You're handed a small bone comb and instructed to tame your lip thunder. Mustaches were waxed, curled, oiled, dyed, and, in some cases, named. One traveling musician allegedly named his mustache Shabahang, moon melody, and claimed it vibrated when he played certain notes. You're 40% sure he was lying, but the crowd loved it. You pass a boy barely old enough to carry a tray, already brushing his peach fuzz with oil. "Start early," he says, "and by 20, it sings." You choose not to challenge him. Some noblemen trimmed their mustaches to fine points that stretched almost to their ears, secured with tiny threads during court events. Others kept them short and broad, a style called lion's gait, meant to frame the mouth like a fortress. You test the term out in front of a mirror. It works. And facial hair was deeply tied to ethics. In some circles, shaving the mustache was a punishment for dishonor. In others, trimming it marked a spiritual vow of humility. You hear of a mystic who shaved his lip clean after every broken promise. He eventually ran out of promises and mustache. Women admired, wrote poetry about, and even dreamed of mustaches. One love letter reads, "When I think of your brow and your lip, I forget to breathe, and my soul leans forward." You sigh dramatically. Same. In smaller towns, elders could be seen offering mustache grooming lessons to younger men, with miniature scissors and a lot of frowning. One elder tells you, "A crooked mustache leads to a crooked path." He then offers you a slice of melon and a small vial of musk oil. But don't forget the most shocking discovery of all. Some Persian women sported their own facial hair with pride. Whether natural or encouraged, a faint mustache on a woman could be seen as a sign of boldness, defiance, or even erotic mystery. One folk tale tells of a heroine who outdueled bandits and claimed it was because her mustache was braver than theirs. You raise a brow, both of them in fact, and suddenly wonder if your own upper lip could use a little drama. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the tiled courtyard, the browed and mustached citizens of Persia continue their grooming, their debates, and their low-key poetry slams. You stand in the middle, a little soot between your brows, a hint of something daring above your lip, and think, you may not be royalty yet, but your face is getting very persuasive. You wake to murmurs of curiosity and a faint tapping sound. In the corner of the courtyard, under a silken awning, a physician leans over a reclining man. The doctor's tools are laid out with quiet ceremony: bone scrapers, polished bronze mirrors, salves in tiny clay pots. You blink and realize this isn't healing. It's cosmetic surgery, ancient Persian style. Yes, you heard that right. Long before Instagram filters and modern clinics, Persia was already dabbling in reshaping the face and body, whether to heal a wound, soften a scar, or maybe, just maybe, nudge that nose a little closer to the gods. The man on the table had a minor battle injury, a slash across the bridge of his nose, but what began as a medical patch-up now includes a little aesthetic refinement. The physician hums softly while mixing a paste of honey, gypsum, and pounded fig skin. You lean in, fascinated. Ancient Persian medicine, influenced by scholars like Avicenna, was centuries ahead of its time. These weren't just barbers with extra ambition. They were learned professionals with access to surgical texts, anatomical observations, and herbal pharmacology. Historians still argue whether what they practiced qualifies as cosmetic surgery by modern standards, but there's strong evidence of deliberate reshaping and enhancement, especially for the face. You're shown an ancient tool, something between tweezers and forceps, used to pinch and shape cartilage while it healed. We don't cut for vanity, the physician explains. We guide nature gently so the soul feels at home in its house. Poetic, slightly terrifying, but poetic. And it wasn't just noses. Scar smoothing was a common practice, especially for soldiers, performers, and priests. You overhear a conversation between two dancers. One had a burn from a cooking accident erased using beeswax and resin, layered over time until the skin smoothed out like moonlight on marble. You're offered a mild beauty treatment, the stretching of smile lines using warm compresses and slow massage. You lie back as rose oil-soaked cloths are wrapped around your cheeks, and a gentle rhythm begins. Press, stroke, lift. It feels suspiciously luxurious, like a facial being whispered directly into your skin. Some methods sound extreme. Clay masks hardened to sculpt jaw lines. Heavy stone weights used to press earlobes into elegant loops. A courtier even tells you she once slept with sticks between her toes to remind her body of symmetry. You raise an eyebrow, neatly fused, of course, but she's deadly serious. One fringe procedure involved binding the bridge of the nose in tight linen soaked in vinegar and ash to narrow its shape over time. You're told it makes your soul look more disciplined. You're not sure your soul wants that kind of pressure. There were also natural reshaping agents, herbs like wild rue, myrrh, and licorice root, believed to tighten or relax facial muscles over time. A healer massages your temples with a paste of dried rose petals and goat's milk, promising the quiet grace of a marble statue. You fall asleep halfway through and wake up feeling both timeless and moisturized. And of course, there was tattooing. Delicate, subtle, symbolic. You spot someone getting a fine crescent moon inked at their hairline using a quill and crushed indigo. For memory, they whisper, so I don't forget who I was before this world asked me to change. Even birthmarks weren't immune to scrutiny. Some were covered, others enhanced. One noblewoman had a mole gilded with gold leaf for a festival, turning what some might call a flaw into a point of fascination. You wonder briefly what your freckles would look like in bronze. Throughout the day, you see no shame in these adjustments. In ancient Persia, reshaping the face was often framed not as vanity, but as refinement, a gesture of care, a conversation between body and spirit. You weren't fixing yourself. You were helping your face keep up with your evolving inner truth. As dusk falls, the physician washes his tools in a bowl of rosemary water, humming a lullaby. The man with the reshaped nose smiles quietly, gazing into a polished mirror, not with pride, but with peace. You touch your own face, now warm from herbal compresses and a little rose oil. You haven't changed anything, and yet you feel somehow better, calmer, like you've listened to yourself in a way you didn't know was possible. And in a world where mirrors are few and identity is fluid, that might just be the truest cosmetic of all. The moon has risen high over the gardens of the city, casting soft silver light onto tiled rooftops and jasmine-laced courtyards. You're reclining once more on cushions, the scent of cinnamon tea curling through the air, and the stars above feel oddly close, like someone scattered diamonds on dark silk. Tonight, you're contemplating something far more abstract than eyeliner or scented feet. You're immersing yourself in the Persian philosophy of beauty, where physical grace was always just a shadow of something deeper, more eternal, something divine. In ancient Persia, beauty wasn't merely a collection of features. It was an alignment of inner and outer harmony, like a well-tuned instrument or a verse that rhymes without trying too hard. The word for beauty, ziba, could describe a face, a thought, or even the way someone poured wine. It was about flow, elegance, coherence. You pass a poet reciting to a circle of sleepy listeners. Her face was a garden, but her soul was the spring. And just like that, you understand. True beauty wasn't surface deep. It was the visible echo of something virtuous. A young girl nearby braids her hair while murmuring verses from Hafez. Her fingers move slowly, precisely. If my braid is messy, she jokes, my thoughts might be too. Everyone laughs, but nods in agreement. You learn that Persian beauty ideals were deeply tied to ethics. A calm gaze meant wisdom. A generous mouth hinted at generosity of spirit. Even posture was moralized. Stooped shoulders implied defeat. A graceful walk suggested dignity and grace under pressure. Every physical gesture was a signpost to the soul's architecture. Historians still argue whether this concept of mirrored beauty originated from Zoroastrian dualism or was a more secular poetic tradition. Either way, it infused everything, from the layout of gardens to the curve of calligraphy to the shape of someone's smile. Speaking of gardens, you stroll through one now, walled in on all sides, divided by neat water channels, dotted with fruit trees and marble benches. It's called a paradise garden. Literally, Pyri Diaza, the root of the English word paradise. For Persians, these gardens were visual metaphors of the soul in bloom. Symmetry, softness, balance. You sit beneath a fig tree and reflect. Maybe that's what all those beauty rituals were really for. Not just to attract, not just to impress, but to create a living paradise on one's own body. To walk through life as a small, moving garden. One elder tells you, a face is like a manuscript. You must keep it clean so the truth can be read clearly. You smile, not just at the metaphor, but at the warmth behind it. Beauty in Persia was a form of storytelling. A lined face told of long laughter. Hands rough from ink meant a thinker. Wrinkles at the corners of your eyes, evidence of a life filled with wonder. And perhaps that's why so many of the trends you've explored, unibrows, perfume rituals, scented sweat, poetic robes, have endured not just in memory, but in meaning. Because they weren't random fashions, they were reflections of the self, shaped by time, intention, and a bit of rose oil. You lay back now, eyes fluttering shut, the soft hum of a distant flute guiding you gently away. Your face is clean, your hair is perfumed, but most importantly, you feel centered, a little closer to that timeless Persian dream where beauty was just another word for being whole. And now, as the gardens grow quiet and the lanterns dim one by one, you let your breath slow. You've traveled far tonight, through powders and pastes, through fragrant rituals and whispered spells, through laughter in hammams and poetry in moonlight. You feel your shoulders drop just a bit lower into the cushions beneath you, the weight of the day melting into the silk of the story. The air is soft now, like the inside of a fig. A breeze rustles the cypress trees above, as if even nature itself is beginning to drift. You're not thinking about your eyebrows anymore, or whether your teeth are pearl-like enough. You're not fussing with your robe or adjusting the scent tucked into your collar. You're simply breathing. Each breath is warm, gentle, like the hands that smoothed saffron into your cheeks, like the lips that kissed a beauty mark just for luck, like the steam that rose from lavender-scented waters. You are no longer studying beauty. You are beauty in this quiet moment, not because of anything added or shaped or perfumed, but because you've listened, you've rested, you've remembered. The night hums around you, steady and calm. Perhaps a small bird stirs in a fig tree. Perhaps a poem writes itself on the breeze. You don't need to know. Let it all fade now. Let the garden close its petals. Let your mind soften. Let the stars above continue their quiet vigil. You've been everywhere tonight, but now, at last, you're home.